means we're not broken. Then I'm going to get started. Hello, and welcome to this very sudden workshop. I planned this in all of about, honestly, 3 hours. We're going to see how it goes. But this is a workshop on dungeon design for specifically in and around Zelda. But I mean, I've used this for TTRPGs. You could use this for game design. This is generally just puzzle design, but it is based in and around Zelda and Zelda fanfiction, which is something that I have been told I'm good at. So I'm gonna trust other people's compliments and say that I'm good at it more than my own skills. I've already broken out some notes here, but I have written up a version of this that I've put on my blog on Tumblr that I will link wherever I upload this video or reshare in the chat. Um, but a lot of what that is, I'm going to be going over here again, but also I want folks to understand that a lot of this process is something I've been developing for like a decade and I've never really documented it. So a lot of this is just vibes and feelings. Um, so I'm going to be doing my best to explain things, but I can't promise that all of it will make sense. As I'm recording this, this is being hosted as a workshop on the Expanding Hyrule server, and it will be uploaded later. So there is going to be the demonstration portion at the start, and then there will be questions at the end from people who are watching live in the audience. Not stressful at all. um, so I will be responding to that, but I'll also respond to comments after this thing is out, wherever I end up putting it. We'll see. But with that said, let's get started, and let me pull up my doodle boop, and we'll start with concepting. So I am going to be doing for this demonstration portion of concepting the 8th dungeon of my work, Mark of a Hero. So you will be guys beginning to see behind the scenes on book 8, um, which is a closely guarded secret for me. I'm trying to keep the book order a secret, but y'all will find out very quickly the country in question that book 8 is taking place from. Um, so, congrats on spoilers and sneaky behind the scenes stuff. So we are going to be designing that dungeon as the example here. As I work through the process I have built out for how I design dungeons. We will start with that. And so I'm going to start in my Obsidian dock, which is where I have absolutely everything about MOA, which is all you see here is you see all the connected dots and the calendar and the map, and then here we have all of the named locations so far in Nadrana, which is the country in question we're going to be building a dungeon for. So to start with this process, I'm going to go over what I think the goals of a dungeon should be. There are 3 goals that I think a dungeon really should hit in terms of building a narrative. Okay. Yeah, I apologize. I did not intentionally mean to just disappear. Whoops. Um, all right. Then I will circle back to concepting goals. So there are 3 goals for a dungeon, and I'm just going to restart this because I don't know when it cut off, but I will try to summarize my thoughts a little bit more. You have your immediate local character level, which is going to be like your personal companion for a dungeon and or whomst the solving of the dungeon impacts. The sages are a really good example of this. Medley and Makar are good examples of this. Riju, Sidon, Yunobo, and Tebu, 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 Teba slash Tulin. I was combining their names. That's their fusion character. Those are all good examples of that. Who does immediately the dungeon impact is who we want to focus on for that local character threat because that's what makes the solving of it personable. So I'm going to use Dragonry's Caverns as an example for this because I think it's a good example of this in structure-wise. So your local character level is going to be Medley is trying to continue to do her job as an attendant, and then you have Kamali who can't get the scale to get his wings. So that's like your personal investment stake is because those are the characters that are impacted by you solving the dungeon. Then you have your regional level threat, which is a little bit broader scale. This is again, we're looking at Dragon's Caverns. Is the impact of Valu being hurt means that the Rito can't continue their way of life. Not to mention that Valu's hurt and he's a giant spirit dragon. So um, you have that slightly larger impact to the region of it. And then you have your grand scale quest, which for Dragon's Caverns is you need to get Den's Pearl to save the Great Sea. And, and so that's your three tiers of like what you really want a dungeon to hit. And they're all going to hit things to different degrees depending on like how much involvement you have from outside forces. Like the Temple of Time in Twilight Princess is out in the middle of nowhere. So it doesn't really impact a lot of people. It's going to be largely Grand Quest, but it's also a later dungeon for that reason because at that point you're kind of really invested in the Grand Quest more than the regional threats. So you want to be thinking about those things for like, is this the first dungeon? Is this the second dungeon? How far into the quest are we? So getting started on that, we're going to just get started on this dungeon. And I had to tab out of Discord, so we're going to see if my mic turns off again while I'm talking. I'm going to try to keep eyes on that. um, so for our local character threat, I am going to say our regional character, unnamed. I'm not going to give away that spoiler just yet for Nadrana, as we're designing this. So our regional character for this, in this book has. I might have to start this out of order, actually. I'm going to start on the Grand Quest level. So Link needs the Sealing Stone here in the dungeon. That is the Grand Arcing Quest of Mark of a Hero, is that Link is going to each of the dungeons to get a Sealing Stone to open the sealed door beneath the Temple of Time. So that is our Grand Quest, is that there is a MacGuffin we need to get here. The regional threat is that there has been a giant spirit fucking everything up. We're gonna be honest. Um, I don't care if I curse. It's just there's a giant spirit messing with everything, um, in the region, and it's been like doing a bunch of weirdo magic stuff that y'all will figure out in book 8. Um, how this has impacted our dungeon, which is we're gonna call we're concepting for the path beneath the ice is the name of the dungeon because this is a I've used several Arctic and subarctic cultures. So like the Sami, several different Intuit. There's a Intuit, Inuit. Gosh, QuickBooks is going to be the death of me. Inuit cultures, to influence a lot of this. So the path beneath the ice, um, and I will not be attempting some of those names because I do not want to disrespect the phonetics of those languages. Um, so you will see a lot, but you will see a lot of that cultural inspiration here as we get into things. So we have the path beneath the ice, which might start giving some ideas on the aesthetic once we get there. This is an Arctic tundra nation, by and large, which the map says Nadrana tundra primary biome. Anyway, so there's a giant spirit messing everything up, and I know recently in the story that spirit smashed the temple. So the temple is destroyed. Um, and so the getting into there, our regional character is using the culmination of their powers and character arc through the story to restore the temple. And that's how it is highlighting our 3 levels of character. So we have to get there because we have to get the Sealing Stone. The significance, the regional threat has impacted our access to the temple, and our regional character is now using their magic to restore the temple at post this getting resolved. And that's how these 3 have interacted with each other. Moving on then, for our designs, as I mentioned, the aesthetic designs of this is in a glacier. So this is an ice temple. So I know that I want to do a lot of rigid stuff, and a lot of like hard lines for a lot of the shapes of the rooms going in. And there are definitely going to be obnoxious ice block puzzles, which are going to be fun to design. Which this is the note that I'm going to say about puzzle design, is that for anyone who has ever run a TTRPG session and has ever DM'd a puzzle for your players and have said, I took this from like a second grade, third grade puzzle book and handed it to adults and they could not get it. um, that is the basics of all puzzle design. The thing is that when you are in an unfamiliar situation and or you cannot visualize or concept where you are, it becomes very hard to do puzzle solving even for very easy things. And so, for writing and designing dungeons, particularly for written text, you want to limit how complicated the puzzles are. So, we all know what an ice block puzzle is, and we all know what a reflection puzzle is. Those are basic concepts that I don't necessarily have to describe all the specific angles and directions over like using basic cardinal directions. But if I say block sliding puzzle, most of you have played an ice temple in Zelda probably understand what I'm talking about. It is not conceptually very hard, and therefore, for people who are not necessarily very visual, they're going to pick up on that much more easily than if you did something that was super involved and like they're going to take the fractals of a snowflake and reflect it back over each other and refit all the pieces together. Very cool in concept, not necessarily great in writing. So we're gonna focus on like sliding block puzzles and mirror puzzles, which really fits for the themes of this book for reasons that y'all will understand why mirrors and reflections and stuff like that is thematically really great. And oh my god, I'm so brilliant. I'm kidding, I'm kidding. So there we have some basic aesthetics for what we're gonna do. Um so then we're gonna move on to our boss, mini boss. And generally my suggestion is I'm able to do all three, but if you can just figure out two of these when you're starting to design a dungeon, the third one will usually come pretty close in line, because you start to see how these pieces are nesting, and then you're like, oh my gosh, it's all connecting now. And then you can Sylvia Pepe yourself, Pepe Sylvia yourself into a solution. However that meme goes, I don't remember. All right. So what I know about this boss is that all of the bosses in the temples are constructs. And I know all of the constructs that they face in MOA for these bosses are each based on a different material that people use for crafting, not just in Minecraft, but in real life. So, like the first boss in book one is made out of stone. The second boss in book two is made out of wood. None of the other bosses are out, so I don't want to go too far into the spoilers, particularly with book three's boss coming out very soon as of doing this. But I know because I have planned all of this out that this one is going to be made out of glass, which doubles back into our aesthetic of talking about this being an ice temple. We can use the glass aesthetic to be our ice magic stand in and do lots of weird seeing things. Um, so there we have our basic concepts for our boss, and we will get to the boss chapter later. The next part is that normally in a dungeon you would get one relic. Because of how MOA is specifically designed, Link already has the relics for the dungeon. Basically, MOA's design principle is based on the idea of doing several shrines slash trials a la Breath of the Wild and then cumulatively bringing those specific relics to a greater boss puzzle at the end of the region. And so Link is bringing in a number of relics already to this dungeon rather than getting them in the dungeon, but I'm going to use them for the basis of my puzzles. So I will be. This is lots of spoilers because I'm going to be telling all the names of these relics. Don't yell at me. I know I need to post in 5 minutes. So we have three relics in this. We have the Icebreaker Hammer, which is a switch hammer, which I stole from Terraria, which Terraria copied. I didn't steal it from Terraria. I was inspired by Terraria, which Terraria was inspired by Zelda. So this is all full cycle. But which is it's a hammer on it's a comedical warhammer on one side, and it's comedical comedical comical comical war axe on the other side. So it's big hits both ways. Then we have the Moondraw Cane, which does the Muddle Bud thing from Tears of the Kingdom. And then we have the Third Eye, which is. How do I describe this? It's basically the alarm spell, I guess, from D&D. That's how they've used it largely. That's not entirely accurate. The Third Eye is basically a small marble-shaped thing that they toss in the air and it looks in the direction that it was positioned. But it can also, and this is where we come back to the mirror thoughts, it can also, if something is sent through it, redirect that shot. So it could shoot around corners. basically, is that it's an extension for the bow to shoot around corners. So that's where we come back now on our mirror puzzles and why I want that, because now we are connecting the pieces and also our glass ideas. We have breaking the glass in the ice, and then we have glass on ice is going to be confusing, and it's all coming together, and oh my god, see? Pepe Sylvia moment. Optionally, there's a third. I have a third note. I have a third note. Link got a magic ring here. He got the defense ring, which again, Moa has a lot of D&D inspiration. This is an AC bonus, so it does both improve defense but also reflexes. So optionally, we can use that. For what? I don't know yet, but we're thinking about it. So now we have all of our concepts. I've had my giggly I'm a genius moment and looked through all these notes and seen how they compound together, how they compound with all of my character notes and how everything we're doing. So now we get to do design. I want to make sure that nothing is breaking because I'm going here. This is going to come up really faint because I'm drawing faint because I'm going to erase. I prefer to draw my maps and then I make them pretty after. I obviously will not have an example of this because I'm drawing this dungeon now. So, here we are. um, so I am gonna draw largely draw. Words are getting worse and worse. So it's fine. Um, I am gonna start drawing, and I'm gonna draw loose concepts because as I write the dungeon, I'm going to fill in these rooms as the puzzles feel natural, and or if I get to writing a scene and then I'm like, that puzzle doesn't flow. That doesn't make any sense. I'm changing that. Or this is getting too complicated. We're going to cut this down. So I'm going to start with, this is going to be my main entry room. I'm going to start here. This is where they came in. Mark my main entrance. I want to do a big hexagon because we do want that snowflakey vibe. And then I want the main goal to be here we have a locked door. And behind it, do our big arena for this is the boss fight. I have no idea how well this is showing up. So this is where they're going to go. Moa also does not have boss keys, so I know that they need to get 4 items and bring it back here in order to open this door, and that's going to be the primary thing. I like the idea, personally, of this room being like a really big hub with a lot of moving mirrors. And so I'm just going to draw a couple of indicators here for like these are like turning refractions for our mirrors. And then heading off into our other rooms, so maybe we'll have 4 branching off, will affect getting to turn these to bounce some kind of shaft of light in order to hit our keys here. However that fits thematically as we go. So now we have more rooms. I'm just going to indicate my doors. And I will come back and lock doors after. But my advice for if you're going to do locked doors, always put a key behind a door you unlock. Because that way, for instance, I always put a hidden fairy chamber in all of the dungeons for Moa. If there is a key behind a locked door, you cannot break the puzzle. That may not be entirely true, but like if you open a door and there's another key, that means that if you actually needed to go through another door or there's an optional pathway, you won't be like soft locking someone out of a puzzle. So if I put locks on any of these doors, I need to make sure that there's a key behind that door so that it can be opened later. I hope that makes sense. But that is my advice for making sure that you don't soft lock people out of your puzzles. So I'm just going to start drawing shapes. And honestly, that's the next step. Is I know what the general aesthetic of this is turning into a spider. I'm going to be very honest. This is turning into something of a spider. And I want to change that. And I don't know how to change it yet. I think this is turning into a skull and crossbones, honestly. Uh, I want to make more rooms. There need to be more rooms. So, So we're just going to start concepting. We're just going to start sketching. I think maybe if we start breaking rooms off of rooms off of rooms, and this room crashes into that room, and that makes it for a fun shape that we can do something with. Okay. 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 No two snowflakes are the same, or something like that. That's the design principle here. Let's put a bendy here. We'll put another room here. And I have no idea where this is going. It's just going to go somewhere. And then we will cut out rooms as they prove themselves necessary or unnecessary. Alright. So we have the start of something. I know I want a second floor to this because I do. I want a second floor to this because the idea I have is I want these to be moved from the upstairs. So part of the puzzle is getting through whatever jank ass this is to a stairs. We'll put the stairs here to make it the most obnoxious. Alright, and then we are going to loosely, and I mean very loosely, this is all freehand. Wait. I know my shapes. Okay. I know my shapes. Cool. We have transposed loosely. Okay. And then I need to put the stairs in this vicinity and in this vicinity. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's right. I did it. Sure, we will do those shapes for now, and then we'll fix it as I see fit. So we have a hallway. I'm gonna do a bendy hallway. Why not? We'll make one of them relatively easy to get to, because that's the one that explains everything. Let's just extend that room just a little bit, and we'll figure out why it's so long. Probably monsters. The answer is usually monsters, or that's where one of our block puzzles are. It's all coming together. It's all coming together. It's all according to plan. I promise. I'm sure all the giggles really, really help. Hmm. I'm gonna put a room there, but I want to change that one's shape later. Because I have no idea what's going on with this space. Okay. Not to scale. Absolutely not to scale. I don't know what happened getting it to be so long. Okay. So one of these rooms, whichever one is the most obnoxious to get to, I think, should be where we put the fairy. That one's a necessary path. These are all necessary paths, so I feel like it should be on one of these floors. What if our collision course room has our secret fairy fountain right there? Okay. I don't know how well y'all can see that. Okay, so we start to have a concept, and I'm gonna go back and refine this off of stream because I have no idea what I'm doing, and also I don't want to talk for forever. But now we start to have a concept to put in puzzles. So here's our central puzzle in which everything is built around. We need to build routes based on easiest. So if, let's say, this is the first easiest switch, we're going to get them relatively in chronological order. Then in order to get this switch, then this door is automatically open, so we won't lock that one. Route to the stairwell here. Come up that stairwell, and then that walkway is right there. Easy. Okay. Then that means that these doors should probably be locked as to encourage exploration elsewhere. And or we'll have a second option that is not locked, but this one has a scary puzzle behind it. So we'll do like a sliding block puzzle, and I'll design it ladle. Ladle. Works. Words progressively getting better. This door is most definitely locked because that's a fairy. Then we have to put places to hide keys. This seems like a good place to hide a key. How many keys do I need? I'm up to 3. 3. Okay. So then this place seems like a good place to hide a key. And we'll make one easy to get because it's in the pathway of the party, because they're gonna have to go through. Well, I already did that. Maybe we add, since I said I wanted to add the shape of this room, I'll change it later. We'll put it here, but this one is locked by a puzzle. So there's some kind of puzzle in here to connect the pieces. So we'll have a puzzle in there. There should be a puzzle in here because it's big enough. And or there are monsters. Or both. That can add threat. Because if you want to do an easy puzzle, but make it seem harder, do puzzle or monsters. Or both. Then this room should have monsters. And a reflection puzzle. Which means that this door is locked by a puzzle. So our reflection puzzle teaches us about the mirrors in order to get here, which we can get around to this room to see this demo, which means there should probably be another simpler reflection puzzle in here, so that we make sure that we're learning the mechanics, and then one in here as well. We don't want to do too many because we don't want the sliding puzzle. This room also needs some kind of sliding block that I won't draw, but it needs some kind of sliding block in terms of like maybe moving these mirrors around. We'll figure it out. So that you can rotate the mirrors from the top, but then there are smaller mirrors to push around on the bottom, and that's our thing. So we have a concept. Okay, so that's a long hallway that I don't know what to do with, but I think that's a good start. So we have the basics. These puzzles will respond to unlocking certain doors. So like this one is locked by the puzzle. This is going to have monsters in it because it has a key. This one doesn't have monsters. There's a puzzle in here to focus the door, so that's the trouble. So here are your options. Pick fight or pick puzzle. And then we start over here. I'm going to put monsters in here, but I'm going to do something easy so as to introduce the kinds of threats we have. Okay, so that's the start. So I can do a big puzzle like this, a big dungeon like this, and this is kind of the next thing you want to think about is the fact that how long you want your dungeon to be is going to determine the size. So all of my dungeons are 4 dungeon chapters, so that's 4 chapters to focus on all of these puzzles, and then a boss fight. So that's also why I break up this into 4. So generally we're going to hit one of each of these as we go through. And plus the fairy somewhere in there, wherever the puzzle is super easy. We'll pad into progress on the next one, and then the fairy will slot in somewhere. We'll see. And that is the start of a concept of design. It will get refined, which is why I've drawn very light here. And I apologize, y'all can't see very easily, but there are 2 stories to our dungeon. We have kind of a snowflakey vibe, I hope. I don't know, it's looking more like an 8. So maybe we'll move things around to get the snowflake vibe a little bit more, or maybe we'll just lean into the aesthetic of the rooms themselves, because this is just for loose reference for myself. But that gets me most of the way ready that I'll start exploring that thought actually in the writing and the continuation of design. With that said, I think that's all of the thoughts I have to share. So I'm going to turn off my camera so I can move my keyboard back. And I'm going to open this up in chat for if anyone has questions on that very interesting process that I described. Um, yeah, well, I mean, if the fairy is meant to be like a bonus objective within the I should read the comment that was actually said because other people can't see this. Um, Lou mentioned liking putting the fairy in the most obnoxious room. Um, but if it's meant to be this optional bonus, then you want to encourage and design people poking at corners and figuring out all the puzzles. Um, so putting it in some obscure way or making it difficult to get to is a reward for engaging with the mechanics in an additional level than the basic design, which is taking some video game logic to books. But that's just general my thought philosophy is that people poking around in corners should be rewarded for looking in corners. Oh, putting traps in hallways. I think it depends. I think a lot of the trap of this particular dungeon is going to be in that it's all ice and that it's, very slick. Um, in general, putting traps is going to depend on the movement in a room. So when you get to describing a room and saying, how hard do I want the space to be to navigate? So if you have, like, for instance, with some of these block puzzles, I might put in pits. And I'll turn my thing back on to show it. Um, Although I know uh, we aren't all necessarily watching stream now, and I said I wasn't showing anything, but now I am. So for some of these like block sliding puzzle rooms, I might go back in and put in pits because then that makes it a fail hazard, a fail condition for not doing the puzzle correctly. I would not probably do it in this room where I think I'm gonna put a puzzle and monsters, but I might put like pits into this room because I want to make a fail condition because there is the key to get in here. So we have a push puzzle with some failure state, but also the ice in and of itself. And maybe that's what some of these long hallways become is that less so they are hallways in the sense of um like this is like a hallway you would have in a house and more so like this is a fissure through a glacier that you have to squeeze through and not fall off of the ice. Which requires both the planning of getting through here and if there's any kind of like speed element. So that can add urgency to get through a space. But that is going to come down to usually more to like aesthetic in a room and also like how convoluted do you want all of this to be. But that is a good question. But I mean, also it's going to depend on the dungeon too. Like, I did not put like a whole ton of traps in this dungeon because kind of the conceit of it all being under ice already inherently makes it obnoxious. That obnoxious is you kind of have a barometer for how much obnoxious people are putting willing to put up with in a game. Is you want to kind of think is like how fun would this be to play if I have to balance on slippery surface while also avoiding pits. And like sometimes it can be, but like doing a lot of it, you start to burn that obnoxious meter up. But then in the second dungeon of Moa, which I can talk about since it's out, there are a lot of traps in that one because the main gimmick of that dungeon is that you basically have Mr. T coming after you the whole time. And so you want a lot of traps because the premise of that dungeon is to balance stealth with evasion. And so it's going to come down to what kind of traps you want. Are they like just general elemental hazard like this one, or is it like pitfalls or trying to explore layers of a dungeon while also navigating like making do you have to make a lot of noise to activate this puzzle? Um, but some of that can come down to your the how easy you want the movement to be between. But also it is usually a good idea to have like a safe room. Like this big central puzzle is going to be a safe room. I would not put any monsters in here or any more puzzles than this already very big one because this is the space where they come back and they're like, okay, well now where do we go next? This is your recenter location in order to continue. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. That is a really good question about traps because and that's also is going to come down into visualizing space and like how complicated do you want the situation to be and how big do you want the dungeon to get. And so that kind of comes down to what are you ready to describe and the length that you want to go into. So I hope that helps. And if there are not any questions, since we did this very early in the morning, so I know that not a lot of folks were able to join, but if there are any questions I didn't answer in this recording or at the workshop, feel free to ask them or send them my way, and I will do my best to answer on at least my thoughts. Um, how do I decide on how big a dungeon is? It depends on the feel and the goals of that work. So MOA is epic fantasy, and it is obnoxiously big. We are going into Dungeon 8, and the series as a whole is at 3.4 million words long. We'll be getting close to 3.5 million words long. And so, like, the scales of the dungeons are pretty big, but also consider that the dungeon itself is accumulated with those trial puzzles where Link got his relics beforehand. Um, but then in something like my original work, Goddess of Secrecy, the dungeons were very short, partially because I was learning out what I was doing, but also because there were so many. And so like if the dungeons were long slogs, it was going to be tedious to get through 13 of them. Um, Similarly, in one of my other works, um, Song of the Sages, um, a lot of that story is supposed to be about relationship building. Surprise, the work that is an 8-person polycule is about relationship building. And so the puzzles of the dungeons may be easier in order to highlight the relationship building, and this is multiple escape rooms as dates. Uh, um, we'll see when I get there, but like you want it to fit the narrative and like how much focus you want to have on the puzzle versus everything else around in the world. Tips on balancing realistic buildings and dungeon conventions. Should realism be ignored? I think that depends on the tone of the story that you're wanting to tell. Um, because if you want to tell a really grounded, like gritty, serious um story that like is focusing on gravity and details and like real world elements of um like how hard do you want the impact to feel like in a lot of my stories I lean into whimsy and fun, and like the story straight up says that some of these trials are like in weird space-time continuum locations. So realism is dubious. Like gravity works and all, but like we're not positive all of this actually connects and where. And so the aspect of magic is a great way to kind of cover up and say like, oh well, it's just using magic receptors that you can't see behind the walls, and that's how it works. And so I think that depends on like, do you want realism to be a big part of your story, or do you want the fantasy element to be bigger? And personally, I lean fantasy, which is why some of these shapes are convoluted in connecting the rooms, because that's not my priority. I'm here to tell a fantasy story, and it's open to be silly. This is a building in a glacier. Like, I don't know how you built that without getting crushed. There's some principles we're going to ignore in order to allow puzzle to happen. um, and so I think it depends. I think if you want to go more realistic, I would focus more on grid, a la the top-down games, and do more like your Link's Awakening or A Link to the Past, in which you have a set grid and it correlates to the grid of the overworld. In particular, I'm thinking of, what is it, the dungeon that's in the forest in A Link to the Past. The one you have to go out and you come in different places and you slowly connect the whole thing underground. It's got too many floor masters or whatever. I can't think of the name. Um, yeah, the Skull Cavern or something like that. I can't remember. Uh, there are too many. There are too many dungeons for me to remember. um, but yeah, if you want realism, then I would focus on doing more of a grid system. And then if you want the more 3D feel, or if you want a more fantastical feel, then put shapes together as fits. And we're worried about connecting it logistically secondary. Um, I hope that answers that question. Skullwoods, apparently. Oh, it does have a name. I've, yeah, I, I, I appreciate being informed. on the Skullwoods, and now it'll be linked to the past. Fans are gonna be mad at me for not knowing that. As if Tuba wasn't wasn't a bad enough wasn't a bad enough flub earlier. I promise I'm a real Zelda fan, guys. I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that. And I will wait since there's more than one person in chat. But I'm glad I answered a lot of questions, and I hope it helps. And I'm always happy to expand on this since dungeons are one of my favorite things to write. I like a good puzzle. I like trying to figure out how to make it make sense in a text base. I will just say if you want further reading on my stuff, um, I have a very interesting chapter naming convention that if you want to read any of my works, you can very quickly get to any of the dungeon chapters because they're all named dungeon chapter whatever. Um, Goddess of Secrecy is pretty basic, but it starts pretty early if you want to see a good way to how I started breaking up those spaces when I was very early on, and then obviously continuing that dungeon or continuing that work, you will see how I continue to grow with that. MOAs, I think, are better designed, but also getting to the MOA dungeons requires a lot more work, so I can't necessarily recommend them. But if you want to ever jump into my designs or see examples of what I've done, you can read my works. I certainly wouldn't mind. But also feel free to ask me questions. I'm always happy to answer. Since this is a specialty of mine, and I just hope I can help. So thank you all for joining. Hopefully I can get this edited into some kind of reasonable state for everyone else who could not. And yeah, um, I haven't done a sign off in forever, and I think that's pretty obvious. So yeah, thank you all for joining. Thank you for watching, and bye.